G'day, mate. 40 here. Let's get right to Mark Halperin, the premier political reporter and commentator in the world right now. He's got a show twice a day on YouTube, and here are his remarks. In essence, he says that if the early vote data continue in the direction that they've headed in this week, that the race is over, that Donald Trump will run away with it.
Let's lead with the lead, as they say in journalism. If the early vote numbers stay the way they are, and that's a big if, we'll almost certainly know before Election Day who's going to win the election. We're going to talk a lot about that. The reasons why Democrats might be underperforming, the prospect that they'll recover. But again, make no mistake, if these numbers hold up in the states where we can understand even partially what the data is like, we'll know that Donald Trump's going to be president on Election Day. So we're going to talk about that, but I didn't want to bury that because it's extraordinarily important. And we got to track that day to day. That's more important than the polls right now. It's more important than almost anything because it's giving us insight into a variety of factors that are accounting for a Republican overperformance by various metrics in the early voting in the battleground states. Okay, we're going to get to that. We're also going to get to a new poll out of Georgia. We're going to get to how Democrats are reacting to Donald Trump going to McDonald's. And, well, of course, as always, take your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, we'd love for you to be in the conversation. Raise your hand. If you've never talked before, today's the part. On nightly news. NBC has pledged to release the entire interview, or so they say. We'll see. And then she's doing, and so that airs at 6:30 tonight. And then at 4:30, she's taping an interview with Telemundo, which says that it will put out part of it also at 6:30. Georgia poll today, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a pretty respected poll, their first or their final poll, they say, of the season, 102, please, shows a lead for Donald Trump, 47-43. Big undecided. You can see the trend line there. Harris shot up after replacing Joe Biden. You can see in their poll, she's been trending down. Trump trended down. Now he's trending up a little bit. Obviously, if Trump wins the state by 4 points, it's a huge landslide by today's standards, but that is just one poll, not dispositive by any means. Okay. Now, early vote. John Ralston is the David Broder of the Silver State. He's just been there forever. He's a great reporter, and he understands how to read the early vote. Let's put up what John Ralston wrote overnight about the early vote in his state. Okay. All right, a little hard to read, but we wanted you to see the chart here. It's pretty easy to explain. The Clark firewall, that's Clark County, where Las Vegas is, where the vast majority of the state's population is, has all but collapsed. The Democratic usually have a huge lead there, 4,500 votes. The rurals are overperforming their share of the electorate. And he says, you can read this, and it's linked in my Substack. It's too soon to call it a trend, but this was a huge day for Republicans. They are ahead now in Washoe County, too. A few more days like this, though, and the Democratic bedwetting will reach epic proportions. As we said yesterday, don't overread the early vote, okay? It can change. We don't know exactly who's casting these ballots, how they're voting, etc.
So Mark Halperin's the only major political commentator who is saying things this explicitly, but there are a lot of other political reporters and commentators who are saying the same thing in a more subdued fashion. And Halperin's been saying a similar tune for the past 2 months. So perhaps he's right, and the rest of the commentariat are just lagging.
But every analyst I've talked to in the last 24 hours, including people who speak publicly, say if this continues, Donald Trump can't lose because the Democrats can't possibly do well enough on Election Day. So, Sean, tell people how you view this data now. We've got one more day in the bank. Every state is either bad for Democrats or not good for Democrats. How are you reading it?
I mean, like I said, I've spent cycles on my heels trying to explain the cannibalization of Election Day voters. I had Seth Keshel on the show last night. You've had him on before. We went through the data. It is unbelievable. Like, it's almost too good to be true on our side. So I don't want to get giddy or excited. But when someone like Ralston, and just out of context, I mean, Ralston has not been a friend to Republicans over the decades. It has to admit.
But he's mostly an honest broker. He's not the right.
Okay. I have a different view. But I will say this. When my view, which is what you were asking, is when someone like Ralston has to admit something like this, that's a big deal. And so I feel very, very good about not just Nevada, but I think the folks in North Carolina that I talked to and the folks in Georgia are absolutely giddy.
Yeah. And Nevada, of course, I've said, all my sources have said that of the 7 states, that is Trump's worst. And yet this is what's happening in the early vote. Dan, before you say how you're hearing Democrats are feeling about this, what could be causing this? Besides the fact that Donald Trump went from saying only the devil votes early, what could be causing Democratic underperformance here?
Look, I mean, it's a great question, and no doubt in Wilmington they are frantically trying to figure that out. I think part of this is if you look at not just in Nevada, but so far Democrats are underperforming in Philadelphia and Atlanta, and now we're seeing Las Vegas. And what have we been talking about on here now for, months? Problems with Latinos, problems with Black men, problems with young voters. And so far, it appears that those problems have not been solved. As you said before, look, there are plenty of campaigns that have gotten off to slow starts, if not lost early voting, that have gone on to win. But when one of your calling cards, one of the things that we've been holding our hat on during these bumpy last few weeks is we have the superior ground game and the get out the vote operation, and Trump has outsourced his, and it's an unproven model. Things like this, give you a little bit of heartburn. And at the same time, Mark, as you said, Nevada is supposed to be, one of our best states. And so it appears that some of our base voters are not very energized right now.
So can I you asked Dan an interesting question, what's causing this? And I think there are three things that I think are causing it. One is there's been a cleanup of voter rolls in many of these states, which I think has been extremely helpful. Number two, the registration efforts that happen pregame. It's almost like the preseason mattered. Getting folks registered, getting them excited, staying in touch with them mattered. And then three is, I think, the issues and the GOTV stuff on our side. The interesting thing is we've stripped roles in so many ways. Like for a while, Republicans talked for cycles about data and how Democrats had outsourced it and we had kept it internally, and it was a big mistake that they had outsourced it. And there was this big debate about what made sense. And the question now, flips on ground game, which is, did it make sense to allow some of these outside groups to do things that were traditionally done by the party in the campaign? We'll still see. But the funny thing is how many of the roles have kind of switched in the last couple of cycles about which party was doing what.
So Jonathan Martin is as close as you can get for a cheerleader for Kamala Harris. And he has a long column here in Politico. The clock is ticking on Kamala Harris. The vice president's tour with Liz Cheney focused on Trump's outrageous conduct rather than Kamala Harris's willingness to work with Republicans. And so he talks about her tour with Liz Cheney, and he notes reams of voting research and results indicate that the issues that Kamala is pushing long ago pushed many people away from Trump's GOP. They're not what animates that small number of people who remain undecided in the second to last week of October. What new voters are being won over with denunciations of Donald Trump's character? The discussion here with Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney was backward-looking and Trump focus. It was all about Trump yesterday rather than about tomorrow and her. And the vice president keeps citing the lived experience of most Americans and repeating all these cliches. But she doesn't say anything specifically about how she'll govern. She mentions no looming issue on which she'd work with Republicans. She offers no reassurance about leading the country from the political center. She offers no critique of her own party, no expression of sympathy or understanding why voting for a liberal could be difficult for a longtime conservative. She doesn't reference her previous commitments to include a Republican in the cabinet or try to create a bipartisan council of advisors. And this is all in response to the opening question from a pre-selected moderator, Charlie Sykes, who is supporting her campaign. So it's not for a lack of effort to push her. Right? There are many people eager for her win, many people eager to see Trump defeated. But Harris just cannot get it done. Right? Her performance confounds Democrats. They hear echoes of Hillary Clinton's campaign in Kamala Harris's focus on Donald Trump's character. You're picking up 2016 vibes, one Democratic lawmaker texted me without prompting on Tuesday. As successful modern Democrats have always found a way to reassure the vital center while retaining their liberal base. And she's just unable to make a case for herself. Right? She means Trump is a bad man, but that she's not going to steer America to the left. She keeps saying that America is ambitious and optimistic. But will she ever say anything that will break through? Harris has run out of what her campaign calls tentpole moments. She needs to drive the news. Pairing with Liz Cheney is a way to do that, but it is of limited utility if that's the beginning and the end of the message. Right? If Kamala says nothing to contradict the onslaught against her by Republicans, voters will believe in what Republicans are telling them. It doesn't matter how often Kamala says Donald Trump is a bad man. That's not going to tell people who are undecided why they should vote for Kamala.
Anything but scary for Democrats so far.
Right. This is Mark Halperin. right? He can't find anyone who will tell you, honestly, that early voting data is anything but scary.
And if on election day this trend continues, the election will be over on election day before we know who votes.
The one interesting thing that I'm going to be looking for in the next 14 days is, do Democrats flip the script and start to say, guys, we're behind. If you don't go out and do this, Donald Trump will win. I mean,
I think they will. I think they will. I think they'll do that by this weekend. I think you'll see the Obamas do that.
And that's a very interesting tactic, because you go into scare mode when you know that you've got a problem. Like, you don't start scaring your voters until you know that.
Well,
yeah,
I
although
think the other problem,
consistently said they're the underdog, which will be part of that. Dan, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the other problem for the Democratic Party here is, and this goes to what we talked about a little bit recently with those 3 Senate Democrats in the blue wall states, is, does the party stick together? At what point do other candidates, and I keep saying this, do House Democrats break away and say, you need to elect a House Democrats because we would be the firewall against a President Trump and a Senate Republican majority? And, if you start seeing more and more of these bad numbers, I mean, look, they just rushed David Plouffe out to do a round of interviews to calm the nerves. They've been putting more and more kind of senior people out there to say, like, relax. We knew it would be close, but like, we have abortion and we have the ground game. And if you start seeing more of this, it's, people start jumping ship.
Right. And of course, I'm sure, well, not sure, you should all know that the 3 Democratic Senate candidates in the 3 blue wall states, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and Wisconsin, they're all now in danger of losing. And that's a source of extraordinary anxiety and upset within the Democratic Party. They want to save all 3 of those, and they can, but all 3 of those are in danger of losing now, and that's a big complication. All right, I want to talk about one other thing and then get to your questions. Donald Trump has offered up some of the darkest and most negative rhetoric in the history of American politics, okay, over the years. Right now, he's having fun, and it shows. And the Democrats are talking about threats to democracy. Again, I'll say, Donald Trump is plenty dark even now, but in his most prominent mode here, he's being upbeat, and the Madison Square Garden event on Sunday is going to be an upbeat event. Democrats are having trouble handling this, and it's just a rerun of 2016. So first, I want to put up, please, 104. This is a tweet from a Democratic operative in Pennsylvania, okay, where he says, it's fun that we're still pretending Trump's racism is populism when only Harris is proposing policies that actually broadly help people. I don't think I need to explain why I'm showing this. That is a very dark tweet, in the sense of somebody who's being sarcastic and frustrated and saying that Trump populism is racism. There are aspects of Donald Trump's rhetoric that have been racially insensitive, racially tinged. Some you could call racist if you'd like, but his populism has broad appeal, including to a lot of Democrats in Pennsylvania. So that's one. 2, Democrats continue to talk about Donald Trump's and Arnold Palmer and Donald Trump's phony photo op in McDonald's. Okay, here's what Nate Silver says, 103. Not sure what extent it's intentional, but last couple of weeks feels a little 2016-ish in that Trump is dominating news coverage with a bunch of stunts that aren't really the issues Harris wants to be closing on. Yes, Nate Silver, you are correct. And the question is, Dan, what can Kamala Harris do about that? Should they stop attacking Donald Trump's photo ops? What should they do?
No, I mean, look, the best defense is a good offense. Like, you have to get out there and create your own content. I mean, you have to get out there and she's talking about why to vote for her or why Trump is scary. But
if you were, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you were in Wilmington, you could turn the clock back. Would you tell the party, yes, attacking the McDonald's photo op is a good use of a news cycle? Or would you say, ignore it, do something else? What would you do?
I would do both to some extent. Like, look, does the candidate and do your top surrogates want to be out there talking about McDonald's? No, but they
are, including not just the top surrogates, the vice president. Why attack a guy's photo op at McDonald's? I don't get it. Sean.
Look, but hold on a second, because Harris did something like this. If Democrats, I mean, I know, cue up the chat here. If Kamala Harris shut a McDonald's down and had a starch shirt on and handed out a few French fries, Donald Trump would never let her hear the end of this about being a phony and all of this. It's part of his shtick, which is to always be the dominant alpha, punching down to belittle his opponent. It's good politics. Like, I'm not criticizing the tactic, but if you're a Democrat, like, you have to know that. And to your point, if you're whining about your opponent, you tend to be losing, right? I mean, just fact.
So,
yes, that's my point, Sean.
God, I hate what I'm about to say, because I feel like I don't want to help the other side. But if we remember when Kamala was at her best, it was at that debate. And I said at the time, she went 1, 2, 3, 4, your tie sucks. And he went, my tie's the greatest tie ever. And he took the bait. What Kamala has done in the last 24 hours has taken the bait. Donald Trump went to a McDonald's. He served who cares? 10 French fries and a starched shirt. And everyone's like, he wasn't wearing a hairnet. I mean, for God's sake, you guys took the bait. He flipped the script. This was so beautiful. So I think the funny part about it is that every once in a while you need to analyze where you're doing well. She, on the debate stage, got him to take the bait. In the last 48, 72 hours, 96 hours, she's been taking the bait. The dynamic has switched. It's beautiful watching him do this. And I agree with everyone who keeps talking about 2016. He was happy and excited going into the final stretch, and that's where he is right now.
Is there any difference between Donald Trump telling his Arnold Palmer story and Barack Obama at the Democratic convention making a fun of the manhood size of Donald Trump? Is there any difference between those jokes in terms of how undignified they are or how crude or crass? Is there any difference?
No.
I think that I sound like a broken record, but every once in a while I talk about people's narratives, right? And Barack Obama has always presented himself.
This is a great point here by Sean Spicer. All right. Your actions, your words, they fit into your narrative. Everyone has a narrative. For Donald Trump, it's not shocking that he would use vulgar humor. For Barack Obama, it feels out of character.
As more of a statesman. So sometimes when you judge somebody here and they do something here, you go, wow, that's undignified because it wasn't Obama. No one thinks that Trump.
Is schadenfreude a sin? Is it a sin to take joy in the humiliation of your enemies? No, but you should be careful about the people and the places and the situations where you display it, because it can come back to bite you in the ass.
I said it yesterday, is walking out of St. Patrick's after going to confession. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he...
I mean, you watch the show, you know me, I let all emotions flow through me. All right. There are many times that I am giddy, right? I'm giddy right now with how well Trump's doing in the early vote. So other times I'm sad. Other times I'm really struggling. I'm depressed. Sometimes I'm energized. Sometimes. So I let all the emotions just flow through me, and I retain a part of myself that stands kind of outside of the emotion and just watches it flow. So by all means, let your emotions flow if they're not causing you to engage in self-destructive behavior, but also retain a cognitive portion of yourself to just notice what's going on with you and to recognize that you are not your emotion, that allow the emotions to just flow through you like water, but they don't get to identify who you are.
But under your theory, the Obama thing should have been covered by the dominant media as a shocking breach of decorum. Instead, it was just laughed at
because they don't like Trump.
New York, correct.
I mean,
okay,
the whole thing's ridiculous. It's utter. Yes. Look, he made a joke. It's offensive to some, but like this is where Democrats just cannot see past, their nose of just like total outrage and disgust with the guy, and they just like. It's ridiculous. Like get on your message.
Yes. Talk about the economy.
Just to put it.
Where Barack Obama was best. Barack Obama was best when he was belittling Donald Trump with jokes where everybody was laughing at Trump. What did Trump hate? The White House Correspondents' Dinner, where Barack Obama owned Trump with humor. When did Kamala Harris do best? When she got out of the gate using humor about, I know guys like this. I know sex. Like everyone was laughing, and Trump was like, gotta go punch her.
Yes, good analysis. I want to do one more thing, and then we're going to go to your questions. And I'm going to play this without comment, unless Dan and Sean want to comment. But in previewing our next 2 weeks together, this is not a program devoted to media criticism or discussions of the media. But in previewing our next 2 weeks together, get ready for the dominant media to side unambiguously, and if the polls and early votes stay the way they are, with increasing desperation with one candidate. Please roll the final element.
This is killer.
Day is just over 2 weeks away, and the fight
CBS
for every
News.
single last undecided vote in battleground states is intensifying. Vice President Kamala Harris is targeting disaffected Republican voters by hitting the trail with Liz Cheney in the crucial blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Cheney was a powerful Republican congresswoman, and today she called Harris a responsible adult. As for former President Donald Trump, he was back in North Carolina again, pushing false claims about FEMA and immigrants. That's after he spent the weekend slinging a crude insult at Harris, engaging in lewd locker room talk about the late golfing legend Arnold Palmer, and staging a campaign stunt at a Pennsylvania McDonald's.
I wonder where Norah O'Donnell stands on the election. I mean,
and out of the major networks, CBS is the closest to the center. CBS News is the closest to the center when compared to ABC News and CNN and NBC News.
The only
Dan-
thing she left out is, and he's a really, really bad person. Let me just remind you.
Dan, do you want to comment on that?
Please.
Look, I mean, if you watch Fox News, right, they emphasize.
It goes from media hating Trump to, in the last 5 days, who interfered and helped Trump, because we're going to insert the blank.
Yeah,
Help
correct.
Trump win, because God forbid the American people actually voted.
Correct. I hope no matter who you're voting for in the election, you had the same reaction to that video. All right, young lady, welcome in. We're delighted to have you here, Megan.
Sorry. I just want to say something that's been really bothering me, and I just got an email sort of like chastising me about it. Who is Liz Cheney for? Because her going on stage and basically coming out saying she's pro-choice now, which again is like one of 7 women who are still like intensely and proudly extremely pro-life. Who is this for? Because for me, all the arguments.
Right. So let's say you've been experiencing schadenfreude as the evidence mounts that Donald Trump is cruising to a substantial victory. Should you try to repress these emotions? And I say no. Let the emotions go, man. Feel it. Feel the good, feel the bad, the highs, the lows, and have a part of you that stands outside the emotion and recognize that your emotions don't define you. So let the feelings rip. All right? Enjoy the vibes. Enjoy the joy vibes.
About like Trump is a monster, Trump's a psycho. Like for me, there's a lot of things that are very alarming about Vice President Harris, and one of them is her and her running mate's stance on abortion. And I just don't know who this is for. What if you're in this era of your campaign with 2 weeks left and you are trying to get undecided voters and you choose to do an interview with Maria Shriver, which I've had enough of all Kennedys in this election in particular, and Liz Cheney, who is this? What women are you talking to? You need women like me. You need normie moms. That's what you need. And these are not people that normie moms relate to. And then going on TV and saying that like abortion is fine now because Democrats such a threat. I
That's Liz
don't
Cheney.
understand who this is for, other than progressives who want to feel good about themselves that we've got one Cheney Republican. Like I think she's just for progressives to be like, look, we're bipartisan. We got one Republican. And that's all I have to say.
I was stunned. I was stunned. It takes a lot to even surprise me. I was stunned at what Liz Cheney said about abortion yesterday. I was stunned.
I can't believe it. I thought she was one of the.
You can't call yourself pro-life after that.
Also, like, no one's pro-life. Melania is not. There's like JD Vance is hedging. Like, you know, I mean, Sean, you know, this is like a very big issue for most pro-life women. Like, it's like my number 1 or number 2 how I vote, especially after becoming a mom. And now I feel totally in no man's land with the party in general. And then like Liz Cheney going on TV and be like, hey, conservative pro-life moms, it's okay. The Vice President Harris and her running mate who signed a bill where you can have abortions up to 36 weeks. Like, it's fine. It's not fine. I'm not going to be gaslit into being told it's fine. I just don't know what their campaign is doing. I was watching it last night and I was just like, I'm so offended by all of this. Like, I'm just so offended that I'm going to like remove everything that's been important to me religiously, spiritually, and politically for 20 years. Or more longer, like 30 years. And just like, I just don't understand who it's for. And I think that they're making really, really sublimely poor decisions. And I wish Democrats.
Okay, let's get a burst here from Jesse Waters.
Jesse Waters, prime time tonight.
I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up.
Wait. I thought democracy was on the ballot, that Donald Trump was a threat because he was going to use the legal system against his political opponents. But we know where Joe Biden's true feelings lie.
Biden say what I think he just said.
I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you right now.
Kamala Harris is not a godsend, all right? You people didn't even like her 6 months ago. Now all of a sudden, she's black female Jesus.
2 weeks until Election Day.
Some of my brothers have been drinking that Kool-Aid and don't go for the okie doke, the flim flam. Can't do that.
The brothers get scolded again.
We recognize what Kamala Harris is doing right now.
Plus,
With joy, we're gonna win!
So I remember following the early returns in 2016, the big sign that Trump was going to do well was the black vote was down substantially for
until
Hillary.
Election Day, and Democrats just yanked Kamala Harris off the campaign trail. She took the day off. 0 campaign events today. And the only thing on her schedule, 2 interviews, not even live. She spent all day preparing because that last interview with Brett, not that great. Or maybe she wasn't preparing at all. We'll show you the interviews later, and you can decide for yourself. Trump says maybe she was getting her beauty rest.
She's sleeping right now. She couldn't go on the trail. You know, you think when you have 14 days left, you wouldn't be sleeping. Think of it. I said, where is she campaigning today, sir? She's got a day off. You got 14 days left for the presidency, and she's taking a day off. This is not what you want. This is not what you want. You can't get over it. Who the hell takes off? You have 14 days left, and she'll take a couple of more days off, too. You know why? She's lazy as hell, and she's got that reputation.
Let me see if we have this right. Kamala calls Trump exhausted and then takes the day off. McDonald's, football games, barbershops, town halls, roundtables, rallies. You've seen them. Kamala today didn't talk to a single voter. She stayed home in D.C. And the media is getting nervous.
You know, everybody I talk to says, you know, I have to turn off the news. I can't read anything. I'm meditating. I'm doing yoga. I'm so anxious. I just don't even know. I'm eating gummies, all kinds of things, you know. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Not eating gummies.
Okay, we got that clear.
All right, no gummies. Maybe she spent the day doing yoga. Because if she was preparing for the NBC interview, didn't look like it.
You never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely...
But that's the reason why you're here, and he's not running for the top of the ticket.
Well, you'd have to ask him if that's the only reason why.
What do you think?
I am running for president of the United States. Joe Biden is not. And my presidency will be about bringing a new generation of leadership to America that is focused on the work that we need to do to invest in the ambitions and aspirations of the American people.
It's a judgment question. That's why I ask. Can the American people trust you in these moments, even when it's maybe uncomfortable for Americans to level with Americans in that way? So that's why I ask. And it sounds like what you're saying is you feel like you never saw anything like that from President Biden.
I have worked with Joe Biden, hours and hours and hours over these 4 years, whether it be in the Situation Room or the Oval Office. I speak with not only sincerity, but with a real firsthand account of watching him do this work. I have no reluctance in saying that. No, of course I don't.
Kamala's trapped because if she says she noticed Biden's decline, she's guilty of a cover-up. But if she says she didn't notice, everyone knows she's just a liar. So she's a liar either way. And then she said the American dream was dead.
Are the last 4 years an obstacle to you in this race?
Here's how I look at it. First of all, let me be very clear. Mine will not be a continuation of the Biden administration. I bring my own experiences, my own ideas to it, and it has informed a number of my areas of focus, most of which are, on, to your point, lowering costs. I am traveling the country. I am very clear. Cost of groceries still too high. The voters know it. I know it. So part of my plan includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries, including the work I will do dealing with price gouging, something I dealt with when I was Attorney General, something I will deal with going forward. Cost of housing. You know, I'm speaking with people of every background in every area of the country, of every age. And, you know, the idea of the American dream was something that previous generations could count on, not as much anymore.
So the other week, she said she couldn't think of anything she'd do differently than Biden. And now she says her administration wouldn't be a continuation. Okay, if Kamala had ideas about bringing prices down, why didn't she share them with Biden? Why'd she tell us Bidenomics was working? None of this makes any sense. Where'd happy Kamala go?
President, do you think
she doesn't look like she's enjoying running for president? She definitely wasn't ready to run for president. Yesterday, she said, guys, you're scared, and so am I.
If I can just speak to what people are feeling. We cannot despair. We cannot despair. And I say do not despair because in a democracy, as long as we can keep it in our democracy, the people, every individual has the power to make a decision about what this will be. And so let's not feel powerless. Let's not let and I get it, overwhelming nature of this all make us feel powerless, because then we have been defeated.
Is that the saddest looking town hall you've ever seen? Democrats are starting to ask, what if Joe Biden was the better candidate all along? They want a coup do-over.
Kamala Harris is not a godsend, all right? You people didn't even like her 6 months ago. Now all of a sudden, she's black female Jesus, the way Obama was black Jesus. And let me tell you something. He had a lot more going for him than Kamala Harris does. And not just as firsts go, but his type of campaigning, his type of persuasion, his charisma.
So while Harris takes the day off from campaigning, the real Messiah is filling her shoes or heels. Barry went to Wisconsin and Michigan today, but he sounded bitter.
Real strength's about working hard. Real strength's about taking responsibility for your actions.
Right, he spends all his time talking about how terrible Donald Trump is. How many people are undecided about Donald Trump?
Strength's about telling the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Real strength is about helping people who need it and standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's what we should want for our daughters and our sons. That's what I want in the President of the United States.
Yeah, he has a guilty conscience after shivving Scranton Joe for a woman who can't even tell you what a woman is. They're even dragging Michelle, kicking and screaming, out of her Hawaiian mansion to say this is the second time she's proud of the country. Where's Michelle been since the convention? If democracy was really on the line, shouldn't Michelle be living in the battlegrounds instead of Honolulu? Every musician is now being ordered to campaign for Kamala. After Usher, Lizzo, Stevie Wonder, the Harris campaign's bringing out Bruce Springsteen for a concert series. Oh, and Barack's bringing out Eminem in Detroit. Eminem endorsing Kamala. Does somebody have something on him? Earlier in the day, actor Bradley Whitford from The West Wing put on quite the performance.
What's up, Mad City? 65,000 rape victims. He was laughing. He was laughing. Misogyny is at the reptilian brainstem of white Christian nationalism. And that is what we are up against. What's next? Is he going to yank his pinky off and light it like a cigarette? And how lucky are we? How lucky are we to have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
If things are so great under the Biden-Harris administration, so great that it should continue, why is everybody so angry? Why isn't it morning in America again? The Harris campaign's running out of ideas and time. According to CNN, their closing strategy is to count on Trump making outlandish claims. Yeah, you can count on that. But that's a strategy? That has nothing to do with Kamala Harris or the American people, for that matter. That's like asking Danica Patrick, how are you going to win the Daytona 500? And she says, I'm hoping the guy in the lead crashes. Oh, if that doesn't work, Biden has a better idea.
Thinks he has a right under the Supreme Court ruling on immunity to be able, if need be, if it was the case, to actually eliminate, physically eliminate, shoot, kill someone who he believes to be a threat to him. I mean, so I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up.
Now we know he's definitely sabotaging her. Comedian Adam Corolla joins me now. Did he just say what I think he just said, Adam?
Yeah, lock him up. Then we have lock her up. We have lock him up. I would bet you Donald Trump could do a better job running the country from a prison cell than Obama could do it, or Biden could do it, or Kamala Harris could do it from the Oval Office.
You know, he'd just get McDonald's ordered in, and, you know, he'd have his commissary taken care of. We know that Kamala's not taking gummies, Corolla. that at least makes me sleep easier at night.
Yeah, I know. She doesn't do gummies. She does crazy pills. She speaks. Maybe if they took THC and infused it in Doritos, we could get a coherent sentence out of her.
She's sniffing the dust on the Cool Ranch chip. Black female Jesus not working out the way they hoped.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny to see these guys come down to earth, like Cuomo and other guys like that. She's a bad candidate. She's not impressive. She stutters. She's dumb. She can't put thoughts together. She talks in circles, a lot of word salad. And he's right to think that way of her. And also, Biden is sort of the demented devil, like at least we know who we're dealing with. We're dealing with the devil we know who's demented.
Yeah, we don't like a mystery in the Oval. We like a little certainty out there. I love how Corolla is asked about the cover-up. She's like, I was there for 4 years. I didn't see anything. Had lunch with him every week. He was great the whole time. And the host is like, are you serious?
Well, I mean, that's her whole thing. She was the last person in the room during the Afghanistan decision. All right, so are you going to take any responsibility for that debacle? No, I am not. But how can you be the last person in the room and have no responsibility for the outcome of whatever we're talking about? So she's between a rock and a hard place, and it's what I like to call stupid or liar.
And she wouldn't change anything about the Biden-Harris administration. Not Afghanistan, not spending $1 gazillion, not opening the border. Everything was perfect, Corolla. It was so perfect, the president had to get hatcheted out of there because he couldn't win.
I know. Again, it's how do you show up to a company and yell, everything has to change. We have to take this company and get it on the right course. And by the way, the last boss did a magnificent job, and I wouldn't change a thing.
That's right.
So there's a podcast, Hacks on Tap. It's Mike Murphy, former Republican political consultant, David Axelrod, and John Heilman. So they talk about Kamala Harris and her campaign and its problems here.
About the show.
Yes.
And you could see her sort of thinking it through in the moment. But there are 100 ways to answer that.
Really, there's a real weight to that argument, I think. And when you see Harris, that's why that mistake that Harris made is the mistake that sticks. It's like
this is what they're focusing on. Let me get right back to the beginning of the segment.
47 per second.
Middle class taxes and only
the deplorables thing. Now they only all the time.
I'm spot in a while, right?
Yeah, best one I've seen. I think it's a bullseye. And
so
that gaffe will be the thing.
Okay, let's play the full clip.
Let's listen to one of the main Trump spots that he's running right now.
A flood of illegals, skyrocketing prices, global chaos, and Kamala wouldn't change a thing.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
Nothing will change with Kamala. More weakness, more war, more welfare for illegals, and even more taxes. Only President Trump cut middle-class taxes, and only President Trump will do it again.
Best Trump spot in a while, right?
Yeah, best one I've seen. I think it's a bullseye. And
so
that gaffe will be the thing if she loses.
So, I wanted to talk about that for a second.
100%.
The candidates make mistakes all the time. Okay, the ones that make a difference are the ones that confirm a fear that people have. So when Romney said the 47% thing, when Hillary said the deplorables thing, now they only matter. The reason we remember those things is because those guys lost. If she wins, this will be, forgotten. But if
she loses, it'll be definitional.
Let's point out. So let's remind David Axelrod also of his candidate. Barack Obama once talked about people clinging to their guns and religion. So similar thing.
If we had lost, that would have been
the reason.
Yeah, but we were aware in the moment, and he was, he went. You'll remember to some sort of union hall or someplace in Western Pennsylvania. And it went right at it after that.
Right.
So,
but still,
the point is,
yes, your point, David, is right. And I think here's the thing. This goes back to, again, to play the Trump side of this out, which is the thing that sort of you get the one place where our friend David Plouffe, very gingerly sidesteps is if you say to him, the Trump argument, the John McLaughlin argument, the Tony Fabrizio argument basically is, the weight of Joe Biden's unpopularity, his 37%, 38% approval rating is so great, and the mood of the country is so sour, and that Harris has not done enough to separate herself from those things. And that ultimately is why Trump is going to blow past his previous ceiling. And David will say, Plouffe will say, that's an atmospheric argument. But there's a real weight to that argument, I think. And when you see Harris, that's why that mistake that Harris made is the mistake that sticks. It's like she has not, she's done a lot to separate herself from her previous positions in the 2019, 2020 era, but she hasn't done enough or done much at all to separate herself from Joe Biden. You could make an argument that from the moment that Joe Biden gave his speech at the convention, she should have spent more time, not in a brutal way, but over time, gradually pushing off from Biden. And when asked direct questions like those ones she got asked when she was doing her media tour, she needed a much better answer.
Okay, let's just play some clips here from very nervous Democrats worried about Trump surging in the polls.
Harris and Trump's taking the lead. That's according to The Economist. Primetime doesn't really make predictions or trust polls, but Democrats are nibbling their nails. Listen.
I'm starting to worry about the polls because I see a lot of the media saying that he's leading and everybody's getting nervous.
Why is basically every public pollster saying the election is way too close to call?
What is it? What is it that's going on here that has allowed this election to be so close?
This race will be far too close. Because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear, but in small pockets among black and brown men too.
So we enjoy watching Democrats squirm, but it's always unpredictable.
Okay, yeah, fascist groundswell.
On what she would have done different. She had to have it, given how unpopular he is, how little people know about her other than that she was his vice president.
It's stunning because they build the whole thing on turning the page, moving forward, new energy, new ideas, yada, yada, yada. And then, candidate, what do you think about all that? I'm the same. I mean, if there's one 3x5 card in the entire campaign that should have been stenciled, and I'm piling on now, but this one stunned me because they're a pretty sharp team, was this question. Yet, boom, deer in the headlights. Not really. Biden and I are the same. And if she loses, this moment deserves the attention it'll get.
I suspect she had that 3x5 card. Why she couldn't recall it in that moment, I don't know. I think it was, honestly, she felt cross-pressured about seeming disloyal.
Yes.
And you could see her sort of thinking it through in the moment. But there are 100 ways to answer that. Again, this goes back to the fat-ass retired consultant on the sidelines rule. It's really easy when you're not on the battlefield.
Yeah, but still, this one is so fundamental.
It's fundamental.
A good chimp could have got this right.
Right. No, I agree. I agree with you on this. And one of the things that has made the Trump media effective is that they're relying a lot on her past statements on video. And
this one was real time.
Yes, it was real time. But on the one hand, the issue of transitional surgery for prisoners is as obscure an issue as could be, and highly irrelevant to the concerns of people's everyday lives.
Oh, but it's important. It's a cue. It's just like Dukakis.
Exactly. So those people you were talking about, Mike, that are sitting on the side, that are cross-pressured, those Republicans who are cross-pressured, and also working class whites who respond a lot to taxpayer money being used for that. And that's the other ad that they're running very heavily right now.
Oh, that ad all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So
it comes down for those marginal voters. Do you take a chance on her or not? And they're loading up risk on her with paid advertising. They're trying to, the Harris campaign, load up more risk on Trump is back. You forgot how bad he is. Bottom line, it's down to her to break through. She's got to sell her.
You're so right. And the thing about it is, in this sense, Trump has the easier argument because he only has to push his negative, because her negative, because he knows that basically attitudes toward him are pretty well baked, and so they're trying to raise the risk level on a guy who people have lived with for 10 years and have sort of absorbed all of the crazy, and he is trying to paint a picture of someone they basically have known for 90 days in a serious way.
Right. So she's written in pencil, he's written in ink.
That is a great line. All right. She's written in pencil. He's written in ink. This is Sean Spicer's show last night.
They don't have the volume coming from the urban core areas that they need. So the Obama coalition, what would Harris really need? We all know that the Democrats don't have the white working class they had when Obama came up in 2008. And he also had a record minority turnout with a record share of the vote. And where the votes are not coming from is core Charlotte, core Raleigh, and core Atlanta so far. The turnout is not there, and it's not keeping up with the Trump areas of the states. Right now in Florida, first day of in-person early voting is an absolute bloodbath. We've got Alachua County, home of the University of Florida, Miami-Dade County are R+ right now on in-person early turnout.
Trump's direction. We've got Road to 270 on Wednesday. Amazing update. Trump is in so much better shape than he was last cycle. Here's the thing. They love to focus on national polls, and sometimes they say, oh, Harris is up a point or two. Maybe true. But check it out. In 2016, Hillary was up 47-39, 8 points at this point. And you know where Joe Biden was up? 53-42, 11 points. They don't want to tell you that, do they? The context. That's not all. When you see what's going on trend-wise, voter registration-wise, this episode is going to blow your mind. Look at betting markets. Look at this. I've told people, I get that those are all cute, but at the end of the day, data is what matters. And what you do in your Substack and in these analyses is data focused, right? And that's where I think we need to be. I wanted to start with some of the states that you've done some analysis in. And obviously the big one off the bat is Arizona, the state that I think President Trump has the greatest likelihood of the 7 battleground states of putting back into his column. Tell me what we should look at in terms of Arizona, because I've got this. I'm going to put this chart up on the screen for the audience to see that you did this forecast model. It's got every county, Apache, Cochise, et cetera, all the way down with what the registration was in 2020 and what it is now. What should we take away from that chart?
Well, Sean, so your audience understands this. We have the media polling, which of course is flawed. And even if pollsters are honest, they're going to have a certain margin of error. But the most predictive analysis that shows the trajectory of an upcoming election is and always has been voter registration by party. 31 states register voters by party. And out of you said 7 battleground states, I throw New Hampshire in for an 8th. We're going to get to that because I saw what you've been doing on New Hampshire. So I'll get to there. But right. So some of those register by party and others don't. Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and New Hampshire do register voters by party. So when you pull that Arizona slide up on the 15 counties, you'll notice that all 15 have shifted Republican. So they're either more Republican in its registration or less Democrat. What that means is the momentum. It's measuring the momentum of a party, and it's always geared towards who that party's figurehead is. In the case of the GOP, obviously, we're talking about Donald Trump. And in the case of the Democrats for the last 4 years, mostly Joe Biden, but Biden-Harris, as, of course, she can't distance from him. On that graphic, you'll notice all 15 counties in Arizona have a rightward shift since 2020, including Maricopa County, which is important because Maricopa County is more than 60% of the vote. And when you put it together with—
So in Maricopa, you have that Republicans had a 3.9% advantage in 2020, if I'm reading this right, and now they've got a 6.6. Is that how you should read that?
Yeah, it's actually, as they're finishing up their registration statistics right now, Maricopa County is now R plus 6.9. It's a gap of 176,000 and counting registrations between Democrats and Republicans. So President Trump, when he came on the scenes in 2016, Maricopa County began voting to the left of its Republican voter registration index. That's your flux of the independent voter, especially LDS voters, which President Trump now has a positive approval rating with for the first time in his political life. So if Trump ran the same margin left of registrations this year that he did in 2020, even with—
Yeah, so one way that Trump is breaking through the conventional wisdom is that his positive ratings are up beyond that which was thought possible for him.
All the issues with that election, he would still carry Maricopa County by more than 30,000 votes, according to these statistics. Putting them out for all 15 counties, you're looking at a potential bloodbath, especially if they're not fully capturing a Latino working class coalition shift in favor of President Trump. My registration analysis easily comes out to Trump plus at least 5 points in Arizona, which may be big enough to pull the Senate race too.
Wow. So let me just— I think this is fascinating here. So in Arizona, you think that Trump could win by 5 points there. That's a slam dunk.
Well, that's a conservative estimate just based on the registration trend. In the Democrat.
Okay, but what if, Seth, let me ask you this. I think what I want to understand is, let's say I was a Democrat, but I leave the Democratic Party and become an independent or vice versa. How does this model take into consideration? It's not that, because obviously people don't have to register by party.
Correct. And that's been the biggest kickback against the type of work that I do, is that just because you're registered as X doesn't mean you have to vote X. And when we get to New Hampshire, you'll see the difference here. But when you stack these results going back all the way into the 90s, as far back as the data can be found, the next election almost always follows in the direction of the voter registration trend. The only times you'll ever see it bucked is if the change is very narrow in an urban area, like this has happened in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania a few times, where the remaining independents, because it's urban, are more left-leaning. But typically this index captures the sentiment of the non-affiliated voter, and therefore that is why the tide is blowing and it's rolling in that direction.
So why doesn't a poll pick this up? I mean, I get the unscientific, I get the margin of error, but wouldn't you see a trend more in like a place like Arizona? If you think he could win by 5, shouldn't he maybe be up by 2, 3?
Those folks are hard to read. And then when you don't get an accurate read on what their turnout is going to be, you're going to get a lot of variance. And that's why Wisconsin was 6 points off in 2020. So polling, even some of the good pollsters will tell you they think that polling is potentially on the outs. And I would say that given the numbers that I can find that are very predictable, that it would be wiser if you're in Arizona to figure out where Trump is in Pima County in Tucson. And if you get a good read on the Hispanic vote there's a pretty good chance with these more predictable counties that he's going to be accelerating his margins. And I've got a number for Trump near 200,000 votes in victory based on the registration advantages alone. That Arizona of the top 8 is maybe the most solid for Trump. I think North Carolina is probably more solid fundamentally than Arizona is. Arizona does have some interesting independent behavior. It's also got a major metro area. Remember, Pima County and Maricopa County make up almost 7 out of 9 votes in the state. So
to be worried about when it comes to the impact the storm had.
Well, the first thing you ought to know about North Carolina is that it votes with Florida. And it's voted with Florida since the 1960s. So if Florida's been Republican, North Carolina's been Republican too. That's a good sign because everybody and their mother knows.
And the inverse as well. If Florida voted Democrat, then.
Well, in 2012, Florida backed Obama narrowly and Mitt Romney won the state. So North Carolina, until recently, has been a state that's voted to the right of Florida. I don't think that will be the case this year. But everyone knows that Florida is going to give Trump a massive margin. And those Sunbelt states are typically moving in the same direction. And with North Carolina, what people would need to know about the voter registration there is it's got a traditional ancestral Democrat registration advantage. And that's been that way since forever. In fact, Florida only recently flipped from a Democrat advantage to a GOP advantage in 2021. So North Carolina.
What you mean by ancestral, though? What does that mean? Well, because my dad voted Democrat.
In the case of the South, you're talking about the old solid South. The old South. I think that you're likely to find a margin between 4 and 7 points in North Carolina.
No way, which would outdo the last 2 cycles by a significant amount.
Correct. Now it was 3.7% in 2016. So what you need to understand about the turnout for early voting, it's more Republican in the mail ballot request than it's been ever. And then on day 1 of in-person early vote last week, 4 years ago, day 1 in-person early vote was Democrats plus 28% turnout. Day 1 this time was only Democrat plus 2, and day 2 was R plus 2.
See, that is huge, right? And this is where the Dems mistake. They think all the mail-in vote is huge. I think our side has done a much better job of getting people to engage, and that statistic bears it out.
They don't have the volume coming from the urban core areas that they need. So the Obama coalition, what would Harris really need? We all know that the Democrats don't have the white working class they had when Obama came up in 2008. And he also had a record minority turnout with a record share of the vote. And where the votes are not coming from is core Charlotte, core Raleigh, and core Atlanta so far. The turnout is not there, and it's not keeping up with the Trump areas of the states. Right now in Florida, first day of in-person early voting, it's an absolute bloodbath. We've got Alachua County, home of the University of Florida, Miami-Dade County are R+ right now on in-person early turnout.
So in North Carolina, one of the things the Dems will tell you is, post-COVID, a lot of people moved to North Carolina because they wanted to live in a state like that and they wanted to get out of these blue states. Is there any data to suggest that happened, that these people left New York and Illinois or whatever and moved to North Carolina and are now part of a new Democratic coalition?
Yes, there are 4 counties out of 100 in North Carolina that are less Republican or more Democrat than they were in 2020. So in certain areas like Raleigh-Durham, that could be the case. But in most of the rest of the state, especially on the Atlantic coast, heavily Republican counties, and they've cut off another 15,000 net.
All right, now he's talking about how things look in Pennsylvania.
Registrations from the Democrats. So their lead is under 300,000 for registration, and it's under 3.5%. So
all right, walk me through where it was, though. Let's go 2016, 2020 now.
63 out of 67 counties since 2020 have a Republican Party tailwind. So that means that in the only 4 that are out there, you have Cumberland County, which is a Republican county in the center of the state. It's just one of those Republican demographics that's going a little bit against Trump, but it's almost dead even. It's not much of a shift. And then we have the 3 collar counties of core Philadelphia. I'm talking about Chester.
Okay, so this guy predicts that Donald Trump will carry Pennsylvania by 200,000 votes.
Delaware and Montgomery. Delaware has a significant shift to the left, about 3 points. The other 2 are very little. In fact, all 3 have a Republican shift for the last 4 weeks. So even the momentum for Trump is captured in all of these counties. So Pennsylvania, is a massive Trump type state. It was D plus 10.5 when Trump won it in 2016. It was D plus 7.5 when Trump only lost the state by 80,000 to Scranton Joe, an Irish Catholic from northeastern Pennsylvania. And of course, we have all the 2020 issues that were present. And then in 2024, it's D plus 3.4%. So Trump ran 605,000 votes to the right of their Democrat registration advantage of 686K in the last election. And now it's under 300,000. So if Trump only runs half as far to the right as he did this time, he'll flip Pennsylvania. The numbers for Pennsylvania look like Ohio 2016. Pennsylvania is they've loosened a lot of their law that makes the state artificially competitive. But I do not think that Josh Shapiro wants Harris to win Pennsylvania or the election, and that's a personal.
Why?
So Josh Shapiro is very ambitious. He's 51.
Because he wants to run.
He's 51 years old, and he didn't get the Democrat VP nomination, where I believe on paper, I'm not sure so much in practice, but on paper, he'd have been the best for the narrative that Harris should be winning Pennsylvania. And right now, he doesn't have that, and there's no real narrative that she should win Pennsylvania. So Shapiro, if Harris were to go in and have 8 years as the president or nominee of 2028, that's 8 years in the wilderness for Shapiro. Then you probably wind up with an 8-year Republican president at some point. So I'm not sure if I was advising President Trump's campaign that I would tell him to go spend a lot of time in New Hampshire. It's not the shortest path to victory, and really it only comes into a victory path on what I call the Hail Mary. I think that he's more likely to win Virginia and New Mexico than he is New Hampshire.
Oh, that's good news for me.
Yeah, Minnesota's going to be really tough, not because of Tim Walz. Minnesota's got a lot of new laws they put in place with their Democrat trifecta legislature and governor that's going to make that very tough. But I do think Minnesota's going to be a close state.
And you mentioned Virginia. Why?
Virginia's turnout is not where it needs to be for Harris to have margins like Biden put up in 2020.
There was a time that we didn't mention. Anything that you can glean in any of those three states?
100%. So the vote.
So now he's talking about Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where they haven't released early vote totals.
Voter registration trend. We don't have party registration in either of those three, but I have mirror images of those three states and others. Pennsylvania and Michigan are political cousins, and they have been since 1948. Since 1948, Pennsylvania and Michigan have moved right or left together in every single presidential election without fail. They've not moved in opposite directions since 1944. So since 48, Pennsylvania and Michigan, and of course they move with Florida. Florida is definitely going to the right. Pennsylvania and Michigan moved with Florida in every election since 1948, except for one of them, and I'll let you guess which one that was. 4 years.
Yeah, 20. Yeah,
right.
I was say 2020.
Correct, but Michigan it's a difficult state, and if you've been watching the actions of the Secretary of State there and the stuff that she's been talking about, you'll understand why. But Trump has finished in Michigan. He finished 33,000 votes to the left of Pennsylvania in 2016. Won Michigan by about 10,000 votes.
Right. 10,703.
Correct.
To be precise.
And then in 2020, he was 73,000 left of Pennsylvania's margin. So Michigan has been about 53,000 left of Pennsylvania, where Trump landed in Pennsylvania in the two races. And my numbers in Pennsylvania look really good for Trump with a 3, 4 or more point win in Pennsylvania, which would absolutely drag Michigan, especially now that one of the key things about Michigan is that we've got minority populations. Richard Barrett said that Trump is straight up winning subgroups of non-whites in Michigan. So what that must mean is Arab Americans, he's getting 25-30% of black men and more than 10% of black women in the Rust Belt, which is really big. And Michigan has a bigger population of non-college whites than Pennsylvania does. So Pennsylvania's voter registration numbers suggest a big right push in Michigan.
Okay, this afternoon, let's get some burst here from Mark Halperin from a couple of hours ago.
The characterization on this platform about the early vote. And a lot of tension in Democratic land because they're behaving as if they're losing. I'm just telling you, that's the view of Democrats too, not just the media, not just Republicans. Trump campaign's behaving like they're winning, and Democrats say that's spin. They're just spinning you. They want you to think, Democrats said today, we want you to think that they're winning. So when they lose, they can claim the election was stolen. Maybe, but they do think they're winning, and they're not the only ones who think they're winning. Not that this election is a foregone conclusion, but if it were today, Trump would win. And that the early vote is very ominous so far for the Democrats, okay? So a couple of pieces came out today online that are being much discussed in my world. The first, if we could put this up, please, a headline from Politico. Jonathan Martin, their columnist, wrote a column that...
All right, I talked about this. I read you lengthy excerpts earlier.
Basically says people don't understand what Kamala Harris is doing. He analyzes in great detail the event she did yesterday with Liz Cheney, and basically says, if you read between the lines, and I know Jonathan Martin a little bit, if you read between the lines, he's basically saying Democrats are in a panic because they don't understand her message, and that campaigning with Liz Cheney on democracy is not going to win the undecided voters. Okay. Second is a column or an article in The Atlantic by Jeffrey Goldberg, who runs The Atlantic. And that story, again, I don't know if we have that headline. If we do, please put it up. That story has, as The Atlantic has done in the past, that story has headlines or blind quotes rather, from people alleging Donald Trump said things that are quite provocative racially charged, disrespectful of the military. The Atlantic has run stories like this before. The Trump campaign says these quotes are made up. The stories are made up. That I've been pitched a story about Donald Trump now for about a week that, if true, would end his campaign. And there's all sorts of things like that flying around. I'm not the only one who's been pitched it. But we have to recognize how high the stakes are, how high the emotions are. And every day I'll be saying the same thing. Please work.
So Ezra Klein is a lefty. He's a columnist for the New York Times. And he has an interesting column here. What's wrong with Donald Trump? So you wouldn't think you'd get something interesting
From New York
out of a
Times
column like that.
The people. It was strange, but if this was your grandfather, you would take the keys away. You would take the keys away.
I don't think Walz has this right. Trump did not freeze up on that stage. He did not lose where he was in the moment. If anything, he was all too present. But Walz is saying something Democrats really want to hear right now. There are so many Democrats, I think you can imagine that I hear from them all the time, who are furious still about the difference between the way the media treated Joe Biden's age and the way it has treated Donald Trump's age. The diminishment of Biden's capacities led to unrelenting coverage and concern from the media and from Biden's own party that ultimately drove him from the race. Every time he flubbed a name or a place, every time his voice was quiet or thick and clotted.
Do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking? Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question.
There is this fury among many Democrats about the pass they feel Trump has been given. And I've struggled with this myself. It's not that Donald Trump's age is unknown or that in the media it is uncovered. But I can tell you that even when we do write about it, it doesn't connect in the same way. The media doesn't actually set the agenda the way people sometimes pretend it does. The audience knows what it believes. If you are describing something they don't really feel is true, they read it and they move on, or they don't read it at all. And I don't think people believe, and to be honest, I don't believe, that the core problem with Donald Trump's mind is his age. Over 4 years, we really did watch age change Joe Biden. It made him different than he'd been before. But is that what has happened to Donald Trump? Is he different than he was before? Because I would say Donald Trump in 2024 is like Donald Trump in 2020 and like Donald Trump in 2016. I don't think he's so much changed as he is distilled. But this is where the critics are right. We had the language to talk about what was happening to Joe Biden. Age is a delicate topic, but it's one we know. And so we did talk about it. We spoke about it relentlessly, had worked for a Bush in some form or another. And yes, plenty of Republicans thought, often privately, that George W. Bush's presidency had been a failure. They thought the Iraq War had been a mistake. But you could not succeed as a Republican unless you tread carefully around that. Or so went the thinking of almost everyone back then. And then someone proved it completely wrong.
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it? You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right.
Let me state what everybody knows. There are many things politicians believe that they do not say. The norms of politics, the norms of simple politeness, suppress much that people feel, and not just politicians. There are vast swaths of political opinion that you're not really supposed to talk about. A lot of people believe that immigrants are bad and dangerous and that we shouldn't have so many of them in this country. That free trade is ripping this country off, and it's the fault of these corrupt idiots in Washington lining their own pockets. That China isn't our ally or our partner, it's our enemy. and that the great threat to America comes from within, that other Americans are disloyal, that they are the enemy, and that the power of the state should be turned against them. It's not that no one else in politics held these views before Donald Trump, but for the most part, it's not how they spoke about them. That was the part of the system that Trump exploited, the market failure he saw. The lie that just because politicians didn't talk this way, voters didn't feel this way. One of Trump's verbal tics is to say, many people are saying, but it's often the opposite. He's saying what many people want somebody to be saying. He's saying what many people might be saying in private, but often are not saying in public. One argument that Trump's supporters make is you don't get Trump's honesty without his outrageousness. You don't get a leader who can break the mold by supporting a person who conforms to the mold. Here's Kellyanne Conway at the 2024 Republican National Convention.
How often do we hear, I want Trump's policies without Trump's personality? Well, good luck with that. We don't get those policies without that personality.
And she's right. You certainly don't get his politics without his personality. How many people must want to do what Trump has done? How many millionaires and billionaires and celebrities must have thought to themselves, I'd be a good president. I'm smarter and more charismatic and better on a stage and wiser than these idiots up there. Forget them. How many times have you felt insulted or wronged by someone and want to just unload on them in public? To go all out in annihilating your tormentor in every way you could? How many times in your work or your life have you believed something other people didn't believe? Something they thought was wrong or impolite or outdated or ridiculous, and you bit your tongue. You didn't want to say it and be laughed at, mocked, dismissed, punished. But we hold ourselves back. Most of us do. And so when I say this, I mean it. What Donald Trump has done is remarkable. It is historic. It is unique in the entire history of American politics. To run as an outsider to a political party, to then capture that political party totally, break its fundamental consensus, slander its previous standard bearers, to then become president having never held elected office or served in the military, and do that while saying things and doing things that until you, everybody believed you could not do or say in politics. To achieve something unique, you must yourself be unique. Donald Trump is unique. Over the years, I have interviewed, I don't know how many politicians. And talking to them, it's different than talking to really anybody else. It's why I don't just fill this show with them. Politicians are inhibited. Before anything comes out of their mouth, they are running their response through this internal piece of software. Some of them are really good at it. Pete Buttigieg, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. The software is so fast and efficient as to be almost seamless. The politicians we sense to be inauthentic, it's often that the software is slower and buggier. You can see the seams. You can watch the calculations happening in real time. But what that software is doing in all these cases is inhibiting. It is running their words through a filter of what they shouldn't say, given who they are and what they are doing and the weight their words carry. If your words move markets and launch missiles, you choose them carefully. But there is something undeniably electric about watching someone unchained from the bundle of inhibitions the rest of us carry around. Watching someone just say it. There's something even aspirational about it. What if I was without fear, without doubt? And if I can't be without fear, if I can't be without doubt, what if I could at least be led by somebody who was, protected by somebody who was, fought for by somebody who was? It is Donald Trump's absence of inhibition that makes him a great entertainer. It is Trump's absence of inhibition that makes him feel to so many like not a politician, the fact that he was already the U.S. president notwithstanding. It is why the people who want to be like him, the mini Trumps, the Ron DeSantis's and Blake Masters's and Ted Cruz's, they can't really pull it off. Because what makes Trump Trump isn't his views on immigration, though they are part of it. It's this manic charisma born of his disinhibition. It is his great strength.
All right, that's Ezra Klein there. And let's welcome to the stage Elliott Blatt and Kip. So, Elliott, why don't you go first? I haven't heard from you for a while.
Oh, gangbang, bro. Awesome.
Thank you, Elliott.
Long time no chat.
Yeah, great to hear from you again. So,
Yeah.
what's on your mind, Mr. Blatt?
Well, I got a lot, but I'll let Kip say hello if he wants to.
Kip.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you. Good to hear from you. No, Elliott, go ahead and make a point.
All right. Well, yeah, I've been meditating on schadenfreude lately.
Great.
So I sort of, I'm thinking, I'm all but convinced Trump is a certainty, right? And so I've sort of shifted from anxiety to schadenfreude, right?
Yeah.
And being me, always second guessing myself, I've been feeling like, is it okay to be giddy about this, or do I need to sort of just keep my composure and just be indifferent, to be detached from it all? Or can I be like a
Schadenfreude,
or is it
No, you should feel it, bro. You should feel the schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, but I'm waiting. As soon as I do, then I have that ghost of rug pull. I start fearing rug pull.
Okay.
Is that erotic?
No,
Is that what you feel?
You're afraid to feel, bro. You're not as uninhibited as Donald Trump. You're afraid of the downside. Kip, any thoughts on the allure of schadenfreude?
That's probably beyond my pay grade. The rug pull. That's what I'm wondering is, where's that October surprise? Everything that you've been pulling off the interwebs has me feeling all warm and fuzzy, the way Tulsi Gabbard does to me without the gray hair streak. So I'm like Mr. Blatt. I'm like, where is the rug pull?
You're afraid of giving in to the emotion of joy and celebration before the actual vote is officially counted.
Yeah, really, all I'm really seeing is they're going to try to scare the pants off everybody with threatenings of deportations. They're going to scream worst case scenarios there, and maybe no more abortions. And then you can see the evil billionaire mantra going. But that's the only three things I'm seeing. But I'm like Elliott. I'm like, it's going too good right now, and we know that the levers of power, at least in the world of media, aren't controlled by the conservatives. So I'm just wondering where that uppercut's going to come from.
Okay, Elliott, back to you.
Yeah, I understand everything Kip's been saying, but I do feel like this time is different. I feel like there's an actual groundswell. I think suspicion, it's fair, it's judicious to think about what is it called, enhancement or fortification, but I do get the sense that this is bigger than fortification, and I think the chances of a Trump blowout are at least 30%, and I just wonder. I can actually see like people committing suicide afterwards. I think they've grown up in a cocoon. The media cocoon, in which a lot of these people have grown up in, has not prepared them for this. And we saw a bit of that in 2016, but I think it's going to be worse this time. What do you think?
I'm not sure. So Mark Halperin's definitely talking about a mental health crisis if Donald Trump wins, and there are people I know in real life who will be absolutely wrecked. They'll be hysterical. The tears will flow. I certainly wasn't wrecked when Trump lost in 2020. It was a disappointment, but my life went on. Kip,
Yeah, but I don't think...
Kip, Elliott, finish your thought.
Well, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just think, people, the Kamala voter their identity is thoroughly bound up in their political preferences, because I think they see their survival as tied to a Democratic majority or Democratic government. And so if Trump were to win, I would think they would start to feel as though their actual survival was in jeopardy, and they would react accordingly.
Kip, any fears about a mental health crisis and breakdown on the left if Trump wins?
I mean, people have been lied to so much about him, and he's an existential threat, and they believe it. I know Luke doesn't believe that people really believe it, but some people value the opinion of Bobby De Niro or whoever. So yeah, I think there will be a talk of that, but I think from your show last night, I think the bigger thing is maybe there's a spiritual crisis or something that needs to be had, because I think the loss of touch with reality on such a grand scale, when you rephrase that Yisrael with he who wrestles with reality, my God, Luke, 340 million Americans need a heavy dose of that. They need to be wrestling with it bad.
Okay, Elliott, you had a bunch of points you wanted to make. Do you remember point number two?
Beyond the election, do you want to retire the election topic, or do you want to continue with it?
Just make point number two. I don't care if it's on the election or not.
All right, so I've been sort of laying low because I don't know if I told you this, but I bought this big collection of graphic novels.
Okay. Yeah.
Comic books, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I really sensed it was a good deal, and I had no idea what a good deal it was. It turned out to be an insanely good deal. And so for the past 2 weeks, I've been doing nothing but stuffing envelopes filled with comic books and sending them to, tossers around the country. I wasn't allowed to read comic books when I was a kid, Luke. Were you?
I never had much interest in doing so it didn't really come up. But I've always had disdain for comic books.
Yeah, me too. I always have, but I think it was ingrained upon me of my parents. It was sort of a pre-pornography genre that I wasn't allowed to partake in, and there's this sort of, I don't know, it was seen as really déclassé, and so I've been reluctant to get involved with it, but then I buy this thing, and there's like an economic miracle, Luke. These things just fly off the shelves, and so now I've been feeling bad about it. I don't know if I'm making
Yeah, I don't think you should feel bad about it. I mean, if it was pornography, I presume these are not hardcore pornographic comic books.
No. This is Superman, Batman. It's mostly Batman.
Okay, so I think that's pretty harmless. If you're going to sell something, I don't think you should feel bad about selling comic books. Kip, do you have an opinion? Should Elliott feel bad about selling comic books?
It's a victimless crime if it's anything. Am I right?
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay.
Good.
And if it makes you feel better at night, think about how much more it cost you to get groceries in the last 3 or 4 years. So you're really that's the universe is just catching up with you a little bit. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what I feel. It's been like this supplemental income that I didn't really expect. It sort of came in the form of a gift, and it's been amusing. Let's put it. It's been a little, it's been a ride.
Yeah, like life is composed of different genres, and business is business. It's a cliche, but if it makes money, if it's legal, and if you would not be embarrassed if other people found out about it, and you should not be embarrassed selling comic books, then you should go for it. And so business is business. Then their friendship relationships should operate generally under the rubric of friendship. There's family, who would very likely to be the most lasting and important relationships you have. There is a time for recreation, going to a sports bar and meeting new people and learning how to develop a conversation with strangers. There are different rules for different genres of life. But when it comes to business, as long as it's legal and as long as you're conducting business honorably and as long as you would not be ashamed if what you were selling was more widely known, then I think you should always go for it.
And speaking to what you were saying, Elliot, about the comic book, sounds like maybe your parents or whatever had given you a bit of a hang up about just comic books in general. It's the same kind of way I had sort of a hang up about video games, how they were like they would just sap all your time. So I was real careful. Like, I love this game called NHL 94 on Sega Genesis, but I would try to watch how much I would play it because I liked it so much. I could sit around and play it 6 or 8 hours a day. So I'd have to be careful just to play it for an hour a day. And I think parents and, our mentors felt the same way probably about comic books. And maybe there was some ideology within some comic books as well.
Yeah, and I think that playing an hour or even 2 hours a day of video games, if you're meeting your other obligations, that's fine. I don't see why playing video games is inferior to passively watching a movie or a TV show. So I think actively playing a video game is superior to just passively enjoying entertainment. Elliot, any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, Luke, but if you watch a lot of podcasts, and you'll see some like very serious men, but behind them they'll have a bookshelf. In the bookshelf there'll be all kinds of like action figurines, like
No, I don't recall that.
And this just gives me such an icky feeling when I see this.
Yes.
And I don't know if the problem's with me, but these are otherwise completely well-adjusted people, They have families and homes and mortgages and cars and things. And yet it's just sort of a genre of, I don't know, background display that I can't get behind. And so I don't know. It's just my neurotic.
No, it's not neurotic. Most family men I know who lead a respectable life do not play with action figures. Kip, you were saying something.
Basically, we maybe came from the generation that said, grow up, damn it, snap out of it. You get what I'm saying? But now the feeling has changed. And if you just want to geek out on X, Y, or Z, that's what the morality is now. You get what I'm saying? Whatever it is, like Patrice O'Neill used to say, if you want to tie up your girlfriend and pee on her or whatever, we live in a society where the morality says whatever floats your boat. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I meant when I say hang-ups, is because our parents and people who we thought were important, they give us these ideas, and sometimes we got to shake them off. I mean, in the end result, I think video games are probably not so good for most people. But what I found is for the last 25, 30 years of my life, I was the one out of touch with the culture because everybody was into Star Wars and Star Trek and video games. They were just 12-year-olds. Everybody lives reality as if they're a bunch of damn 12-year-olds now. And that's just the way it is. It's me that's out of step. You get what I'm saying, Elliot? You get what I'm saying, Luke?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is just being a Generation Xer. I know, Luke, you don't like generation speak, but I don't know. But, a lot of these people with these bookshelves are also Xers, so it's probably not applicable. Anyway.
I'm just wondering why it just never comes up in my life. The people that I'm close to, they're not playing with action figures. People I'm close to do play some video games, and they're often strongly into video games, but that goes along with a package where they're working 40 to 70 hours a week, where they're providing for families with several children who they're sending to an Orthodox Jewish day school. So anyway, Elliott, do you have a further point? Next point.
Well, I think it's a way of saying, like, I feel like a lot of these people, I think they were forced to get serious at a very young age, and their way of, and it's sort of a way that they're sort of signaling that their youth was cut short, and they wanted that youth wasn't completely finished, so they're just sort of signaling subtly that, I never wanted to be the corporate guy that I've become, but that's what's happened. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Can I make a point?
Yes, Kip, please.
Those boomers, the people who are just 1 year older than you, Luke.
Yes.
They were treated as such that you were supposed to be an adult at 18. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that everybody between your age and my age, people born in, let's say, 66, 67, 68, 69, all of a sudden, instead of being able to drink at 18, now you had to wait to 21 to be able to drink. And all these little rites of passages that it used to be, if you wind up around a telephone pole, at 18, that's just what would they call Darwinian? That's just a Darwinian thing that happens. But then I feel like everybody from maybe yours and my age, Luke, all the way to Elliott's age, they stunted that a little bit, as if to say it was cool to be hanging around at 21, 22, 23. Like I keep trying to impress upon you here lately. Now I think the parents realize that the American dream, and that you might not be doing them psychologically any good by kicking them out of the nest at 18 or even 21, because hell, rent has doubled in the past 18, 24 months where I live. It used to be like $650 a month for a 1-bedroom. Now it's like $1350 a month. Now you would say, Luke, that's cheap. Elliott would say that's a steal. But the average pay around here might only be $14, $15 an hour. So it's all relative.
Yeah, there is a different relationship between parents and children since I was born. So for people born prior to 1960, they tended to have a more distant relationship with their parents into adulthood. But for people born after I was born in 1966, they are much more likely to be friends with their parents. And I think this is a good development, that once you become an adult, if you can be friends with your parent, I think that's a great thing. Now, should you live with your parent? Generally speaking, I think that's probably a bad idea unless your parent needs care. So if you take on the responsibility of looking after and caring for your parents, then obviously that's honorable. If you're in an extreme economic distress and so that you have to live with your parents, that's deplorable, right? If your life doesn't launch and therefore you're still living with your parents, that's sad. And
Yes.
but there's also a huge cultural component. So I recognize in Persian culture, it's traditional. In many traditional cultures, it is the thing to do for women to stay living with their parents until they get married. So I'm not going to say that that's bad for them. I grew up an Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxons tend to be the least likely of all parents to live through their kids. I always took it for granted that after I turned 18, that I would be financially on my own, that I'd have to steer my own ship. And in the Anglo-Saxon culture I grew up in, there was relatively little of parents living through their kids. It's much more common in ethnic culture. Elliott, anything you want to add?
Well, I remember when I was growing up, it was very common. I've heard these stories. It wasn't true of me, but I've heard it of many. That when a kid turned 18, their parents would start charging them rent.
Yeah.
They were encouraged to leave the nest and become independent as soon as possible. I can sort of understand that, but also it is also true that the housing situation has changed such over the generations that that's just simply not possible for these kids becoming these newly turned 18-year-olds. And it's going to have consequences.
Well, there are some positive consequences of, say, living in a big family and having closer relations with your parents. But if by economic necessity you're forced to live with your parents, I think there's probably something wrong with you, unless you're part of a traditional culture.
Well, I think it's a fact. I think in those days the country was still expanding, right? That there was opportunity everywhere, and there's really no excuse for you to not have a way of supporting yourself. And I think things have changed such that I just don't think there are those opportunities for kids that there was.
At what level of IQ? Obviously, a kid with a 115 and above IQ is perfectly capable. Okay, 100 IQ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
there
like,
aren't the jobs for life. There aren't the manufacturing jobs that used to be just fine for the 100 IQ.
Yeah, and those were jobs that could, create the basis for a family, and those have quietly gone away, and they become Starbucks jobs.
Also, if we could talk about parental modeling, up until the 1970s, I would say the late 1970s, a man generally only worked at most 3 jobs in his whole lifetime, usually maybe 2 jobs, a first job and then the job he kept until he retired. And even Elliott's generation can't even fathom that. They can't even fathom that. So that's a different, there was also a mentality up until the 70s to where people were what you called company men, where they would work over for the company. They basically, everybody treated the company like they were a manager, and they really gave a shit about the details. And then as the rise of HR and all that stuff came on, I guess all throughout the 80s, you could see that the human beings that had made the companies run were now just treated as just numbers on a graph, and they had plenty of people at that point. So there's something about what Elliott was in, and something about what happened to our economy in the 70s, to where there was a change, to where the whole idea of us having parents modeled who were company men who only had just a couple of jobs. People can't even understand that. They can't even relate to that now.
Right.
So a lot has to.
Yeah. Prior to the 1970s, it was not considered a great thing to go work for yourself. It was only with all the dislocations that came from the 1970s that we suddenly got this brand new ethos in American life that the goal, the dream is to work for yourself. Prior to the 1970s, the goal and the dream for most people was to work one job your entire lifetime for one big corporation that provided generous benefits.
Yes, and the company did take care of the people. That's what went away. At first, the company started pulling away the benefits, and then all through the 80s, the people, the employees, started catching on to the fact that, hey, the company's not there for us. Where did our pension go? X, Y, and Z. It just went on and on, to where all of a sudden it became like a war between HR and employees by the 1990s. That's the way I see it, at least.
Hey, can I say something here?
Yeah.
So have you ever heard of the NUMI plant, NUMI, in
No.
Fremont, California?
No.
Okay. So that's where Teslas are currently made. But prior to this plant, this is a giant industrial facility in the East Bay, in the Bay Area. It was like a General Motors plant, and over time, the unions dominated. Unions were very powerful in the 70s, and over time, they got so powerful that nobody did any work, and the quality of American-made cars just disintegrated, and they were eclipsed by Japan. And eventually, they had to close the NUMI plant because that just wasn't the business because, people started to value Japanese cars much more because they were reliable and they didn't break down and they were better designed and they were more fuel efficient, right? Innovation stopped. And so it's one thing to sort of blame, American capital for this, but the American American auto workers had a big part to play in the disintegration of the auto industry. And it's a much more nuanced conversation that I think goes on in the political sphere. Anyway, it's worth reading about.
Okay. Kip, do you have an additional point or a different point that you'd like to make?
Maybe a side note. When a lot of that stuff started happening, for example, Michigan started drying up. They couldn't get that $75 an hour labor working on those assembly lines anymore. That work got moved down to places like Spring Hill, Tennessee for the Saturn plant. Y'all remember the Saturns?
Yeah.
And the side note was all the Detroit style big city crime and all the rackets and stuff that had been up in Detroit showed up in little old Columbia, Tennessee or whatever. And I think it took them like a decade for the police force to adjust to the fact of they had Detroit mentality there now. You know what I mean? It was whatever was Tennessee about it was all gone the moment the Saturn plant opened, because they brought all that Michigan mentality right along with them, and it all changed overnight.
Yeah. In contrast, Germany figured out how to correctly balance the needs of both labor and capital, and they've figured out, how to compensate both sides fairly, and it became a national concern. And as a result, they managed the situation so well that they became the economic engine of Europe.
Yeah. I mean, where do you spend time around a cohesive society? I mean, by comparison to the United States, Australia is a high trust, highly cohesive society. But in comparison to Australia, I mean, Japan and Germany and much of France are just incredibly cohesive, high trust societies. Germany's got incredible workforce, discipline, cohesion, social trust until Angela Merkel's gigantic mistake allowing in 2 million people from the Middle East. But it takes your breath away when you encounter cohesive high trust societies, when you have firsthand experience, when you're in Germany or you're in Japan or you're in Australia or you're in a place that's safe, that's trusting, and where people get along and where there's a high esprit de corps and people work together. And then it's so discouraging to come back to Los Angeles or San Francisco, New York City, Detroit, Seattle, where we basically feel almost nothing in common with most of our fellow citizens.
Here. Yeah, absolutely. But there are examples, there are examples of societies that work, and we're not allowed to discuss them. It's only now that I understand the sort of ethnic dimension to this that is real.
Right. Elliott, when was the last time you were in a high trust, cohesive society?
I'm an American, bro. I don't.
You don't travel overseas.
I don't. I'm very poorly traveled. I've been to Europe once, been to Mexico twice, and Canada. I don't really travel outside the U.S. much.
Okay, Kip. How about you? Are you a traveled man in the last decade?
Not that much, but I can tell you, back when I was in the Marines, I went to Norway, and everybody there got along so swimmingly. You know what I mean? It's totally different from where I live, and so in fact, you could sense there was a freeness among the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A similarness, a likeness that I could never feel at home where I live.
And most Americans had a substantial degree of this prior to the 1960s. I mean, in Los Angeles, people typically didn't lock their cars. They didn't lock their homes up until the 1960s.
Yes,
Los Angeles
yes.
used to be the most Anglo-Saxon big city in the United States, essentially until the 1960s.
Yeah, I grew up in rural New England. I guess I got a taste of that because I was just like small town America, but it was Anglo-Saxon dominated by a large degree. I mean, it was Anglo-Saxon and French Catholic. But here's an example of like how chill things were. There was one church in the small town, and they just made an agreement, that the Protestants would have it on Sunday, and the Catholics would have it on Saturday. And they just worked out an agreement, right? And so this one building was shared between these two Christian denominations. There was nothing of the strife that went on. And, it just shows you how negotiation is possible, And the thing is that everybody, shares common ancestry.
Yeah. Okay, Elliott, do you have an additional point you'd like to raise, or an anecdote that you want to share?
I do. I mean, are you closing down, or do you want?
No, go ahead, please. Please go ahead.
Okay, so like I'm sort of looking ahead in here, and I'm thinking, well, what should Trump do if he is swept into office and he does have a mandate, of sorts, if he has all three houses? And I'm going to posit that he needs to just go nuts. He has no problem. He's not going to be reelected. It's impossible for him to run again. And he just needs to just rip the Band-Aid off the scab and go crazy all at once. Just roll back everything, and not do this sort of conciliation tactic that everyone's going to urge him to do. But he needs to actually do the opposite. He needs to just tear up his reputation and just forget about being popular and go crazy. What do you think?
Well,
by crazy, I mean go to the right.
Yeah, I have some trepidation. I'll give you one example, and I was awakened to the problem with this Republican approach of contempt for government, in that government performs a lot of important, necessary tasks, and there's just this widespread Republican contempt for government. They wanted to shut down parts of the Weather Bureau and other parts of the civil service that had their responsibility, food safety or nuclear safety, like all sorts of vital tasks of government. And so on the one hand, I like the idea of more political appointees, but if these appointees are not competent, right? If Trump doesn't make the government more competent, but only just follows Republican prejudices to reduce the power and influence of government, that would be a bad idea. I don't just want Trump supporters in the civil service. It is more important to me that they be competent than that they support Donald Trump. So I want him to be effective. And so sometimes to be effective means that you understate the case. Sometimes to be effective, it means that you compromise and make deals with the other party. Sometimes to be effective, you are just ruthlessly passing and enforcing executive orders. So I wanted an effective Donald Trump, and that could mean attitudes and strategies from all over the spectrum, from confrontation to appeasement and compromise. I want him to be effective in moving forward his agenda, and whatever it takes to be effective. I want him to appoint effective, efficient people, not just Trump supplicants and people who support Donald Trump. And so my biggest concern about Donald Trump will be that he will lack effectiveness. Kip, did you want to add something?
Yes, and we know going in, this is that he's not going to be a panacea. You get what I'm saying? It's going to be a process. We're talking about saving America. He's saying it for what it is, right? He's got to save the country. So that's a process. So what'll be interesting to see, like you're saying, the definition of what we're going to do A to Z to do that, and knowing that it is a process. And I think that's one thing the Democrats get wrong about, say, the three of us. They think we don't see stuff about Trump that can be downright offensive. but I don't think nobody would say that he wasn't. He's an imperfect tool, but you got to work with what you got. So anyway,
Yeah,
I was going to ask.
Hang on. There's a great book by Michael Lewis. It's called The Fifth Risk. And it talks about the important things that government does. So it examines the transition of the political appointments of the Donald Trump presidency, especially with respect to 3 government agencies, the Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Commerce. And these agencies do some very important work, and Donald Trump and his administration were quite careless. And so we need prizes, we need praise, we need recognition for civil servants who do great work. So if people are interested in the fifth risk, in the importance of civil servants, then read this Michael Lewis book. It came out in 2018. And then simultaneously, I recommend the 2021 book, The Premonition, about those people who saw that we were going to have a problem with COVID and who were trying to move the political machinery towards taking it seriously when so many politicians were just denying that it was any big deal. Kip, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to basically ask you, and if it's applicable, Elliott, a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what is it either about Luke or modern women that's kept you a bachelor for 58 years? And I guess for Elliott, it would be, what, 40 some odd years? If it applies to him. I don't really know as much about Elliott.
Oh, I'd say for me, it would be 2 things. Number one, most important, my vegetarian diet, which left me in a state of poor health until the last 3 years. And second thing would be not getting diagnosed and medicated for ADHD, which made close, intimate relationships unsustainable. So those 2 things were the 2 primary obstacles. Oh, also the out-of-control emotional addictions that I only got a handle on in the last 10 years. So those 3 things, that's my understanding of why I've never married. Elliott Blatt, your thoughts? Why have you never married?
One word. Tattoos.
No, take it seriously. No. He just wants to say has absolutely nothing to do with Elliott Blatt. The fault's with the other party. The fault's all with women.
Yeah, it's like, I was in the game for a while, and then the level of neurosis that I had to deal with, that I just, the cost benefit just seemed way out of whack. And so I kept thinking something was better, just a little bit better or sort of sane. No, not to say that, I was the paradigmatic person of image of sanity, but I just couldn't settle for what was offered. I just felt like it would have been just misery. The relationship I've been in have been so miserable that I just couldn't bear being miserable.
Here's the saying that comes to mind when you say that, Elliott. It's the problem is not that the good is too expensive. The problem is that you can't afford it.
How old are you, Elliott?
I'm not ready to disclose yet. I will soon.
You're in your 40s. You're in your 40s? Can you tell us that?
He's in the second half of life. Second half of life.
No comment. Middle-aged, bro. Middle-aged.
Oh, middle-aged. Okay. But so that ship has not completely sailed at this point. You haven't given up hope on the fairer sex yet.
I wouldn't say it's sailed, but it's definitely at the dock.
and with me, I would say the reason I didn't get married a few times earlier was probably a selfish reason of thinking I would be settling. You get what I'm saying? That Mrs. Right around the corner. Yeah. Why would I take a 7.8 or an 8.1 here when she could just be right around the corner? And I've still got my game, and I don't think like that anymore. But what say you, Luke, on these matters?
Yeah, but I think that is how we're conscious about thinking about it. But I think there are probably deeper issues, and so we justify and rationalize it in that terms. It's very tempting to give it a moral accountability where we talk about where we disclose weaknesses and forms of selfishness that are not the real issue. And so I understand that is how the issue is experienced, but I think that there are deeper issues going on about just our level of comfort with intimacy and our ability to hang out attached to somebody else, and then we have to explain why it is that we don't sustain relationships, and so we come up with explanations that are that don't rip us open inside when we share them. But the explanation that you gave, Kip, is an incredibly common explanation among men, and I think there's something deeper going on, and what's going on in a deeper way is a lack of ease with oneself that inhibits the ability to develop attachments with other people, and then we have to intellectualize and explain what's going on, and the very easy male explanation is, oh, I think I just always hoping that something better would come along.
I would like to add, Luke, that I think that I know you've called yourself a narcissist a few times, and maybe you are. You know yourself better than I do. But I think the smartphone society has created 340 million narcissists to some degree. You wanna speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think it has. I don't think the smartphone society has changed society in such dramatic terms. I think almost all the statistics that are thrown out about how smartphones have caused a dramatic rise in depression, et cetera, have really nothing to do with smartphones. So a few decades ago, comic books were going to be the ruin of people, and then it was TV, and then it was smartphones, and I don't believe any of these external technological devices are the primary reason that most people have trouble. Elliott Blatt, anything that you've heard you want to comment on?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you say is true. I'm just thinking about myself and like the standards that I would want, like for a child and a family. I felt like I couldn't provide those, right? I would be left with like a public school situation with and this was in Boston, with a disastrous education system and just an absolutely terrible corrosive culture, that I just kept thinking that what I needed to do was just focus on my career and then get myself to a place where, I could, earn at the level where I could do it right rather than sort of scrounge along the bottom. There's a definite economic angle to this that I think needs to be appreciated.
Yeah, and my suspicion is that's the explanation that comes ready to the lips, but what's really going on is something deeper, a lack of ease with oneself, therefore difficulty developing intimate relationships with other people. And when that happens, we need to come up with an explanation, and it's just a lot easier to come up with the sort of explanation that you offered. I might be wrong, but Kip, go ahead.
I would say that Desmond and Jim, our fathers, were more of the school of go out there and get yourself a car payment, get yourself some of these things. It'll just make you work harder. They would say, don't be stupid about it. They bite off more than you can chew because you're young, and you're young enough where you can go work on Saturdays and Sundays, chopping up wood or doing something on the side if you had to. Could I ask a follow-up question on maybe the influence of those 4 foster moms? And for Elliott, maybe he seems like he doesn't like to talk about himself as much, so he probably won't want to talk about this. But the influence of those 4 foster moms, do you think that maybe contributed to the fact that you're saying it was more all about Luke and his medical conditions, but do you think those seeing 4 different moms, that good Lord, having one good one is hard. The chances of having 4 good ones, damn near impossible. You know what I'm saying? You probably saw the full array of good moms and bad moms, of people trying to be your mom.
Yeah, I would say that the amount of mental illness and dysfunction that I encountered from people who took over the mother role from me, just a whole string of different women, that didn't predispose me to inner peace and the ability to develop relationships with others. Instead, it instilled in me rage, particularly rage against women, which has not been helpful. Elliott, anything that you want to add?
Well, yeah. So I grew up. There wasn't a whole lot of stability when I grew up, and so I felt the only thing I wanted to sort of get myself right and situated was a certain amount of stability and calm. And I felt like before, until I attained that, I couldn't contemplate anything else. And because I didn't want to put anyone else through that style of instability that I grew up with. So, I always felt as though it was this, I may have been neurotic and all, but I always felt it was the carrot and the stick. I never could sort of grasp that carrot to the point where I felt like, okay, I'm established.
It almost sounds to me, gentlemen, as if you both of you maybe were introduced to a world where you thought twice about bringing somebody else into said world based upon your own early life experiences, or maybe I'm jumping to conclusions there.
Well, I think that's the explanation that comes readily to the lips, but I think the truth is much more painful, is that neither Elliott nor I were capable because of things going on inside of us, not because of the outside world was so screwed up. It's so much easier to blame the outside world for internal dysfunction. But as long as I was a sex and love addict, as long as I was an under-earner, as long as I had tendencies towards debting and other disabling emotional addictions, I was never going to be able to build, let alone sustained, a lasting relationship, let alone being a reasonable father and a responsible husband.
There's not enough hours in the day. You get what I'm saying? A responsible sex addict, hell, that's a full-time job in and of itself. Am I right? Can I get an amen?
Well, it's impossible. You can't be a responsible sex addict. Can't be a responsible alcoholic. I guess there are degrees of functional and dysfunctional, but you would be a really bad bet for some woman to bet on if you've got active addictions operating that you're not dealing with. Elliott.
Oh, well, on the flip side, I just saw so many people jumping into families really early in life and just watching them explode in the most, horrific ways possible. And that was not an appealing picture. And so I felt that, I was, where I ended up is not where I planned to be. It's like, you look at things, you evaluate situations, and then you draw your conclusions on what you see in front of you, and then you try to chart a course through that. So I'm not. It's like you are who you are in the moment. You evaluate a situation, and then you try to make the best decisions you can. And so, obviously, I think I could have been benefited from some good advice. And advice in my 20s was not something I was eager to take. But there's just a certain amount of, I want to say, fate that sort of determine things.
Yes. The goddess Fortune with her tiller and her cornucopia and that wheel of fortune. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, let's start to wrap things up. So any final words for this evening, Kip?
Yeah, I would. We talked yesterday for a minute about constant reflection, and I just want to speak for just a minute to close on the value of reflection. Some people, when they read Epicurus, they say constant analysis, but I prefer reflection. And I just want to talk about how important it is to notice any curious thoughts that flutter among the normal thoughts that you have in your mind, and how important it is to examine those, poke at them, try to gain understanding, and if necessary, take some action on them. And an example of that was when I had gathered up those dark thoughts and shared them with you, when I had some anti-Israel sentiment, just to kind of throw that out there at you and let you know, let you give me some feedback or whatever. So I think it's important that we do that, because sometimes I forget, when those little Shinto people over in Japan bow at each other, they're not bowing at Luke or Kip or Elliott. They're bowing at that little piece of the divine that they see in us. And There's times when I'm watching a Byron Allen production, whether it's a Comics Unleashed or one of his pseudo game shows or whatever it is, I forget that he's got that little spark of the divine. I forget that Charlemagne the God, to me, he seems so ungodly, but I forget that he does have that little spark of the divine with inside of him. The same way that those bitches on The View actually have a little spark of that divine in them. They don't know where it's at. You know, it's lost to them, but it's there. So I just think it's important sometime to do that reflection when I do get those curious thoughts and not let them just stay and fester. You know what I mean?
Yep. Okay, great. Thanks, Kip. Elliott Blatt, any final thoughts for today?
Hail Trump, hail victory.
Hail our people.